On January 27, 2025, something happened that sent shockwaves through Silicon Valley and wiped out over $1 trillion from global tech stocks in a single day. It wasn't a cyber attack. It wasn't a market crash. It was something far more unsettling to the American tech giants who thought they had an unbreakable lead in artificial intelligence. A small Chinese AI startup called DeepSeek had just released something that made Google's executives panic. Microsoft formed an emergency virtual war room and forced every major US tech company to completely rethink their AI strategy. What they released challenged everything Silicon Valley believed about AI development, and it happened so quietly that most of the world didn't even notice until the market started bleeding. This is the story of how China's AI breakthrough caught America sleeping, and why some experts are calling it the beginning of a new kind of warfare: neural warfare. To understand why this moment was so earth-shattering, you need to understand what was happening behind the scenes in the months leading up to it. Since 2022, the United States had been engaged in what can only be described as an AI arms race with China. But unlike previous tech competitions, this one had the highest possible stakes. The Biden administration had implemented the most comprehensive export controls in modern history, specifically targeting China's access to advanced AI chips. We're talking about cutting off access to NVIDIA's H100 and A100 processors, the supercomputers that power AI development. The message was clear: if you can't access the most powerful hardware, you can't compete in the AI race. By late 2024, this strategy seemed to be working. Chinese AI models were consistently lagging behind their American counterparts by significant margins. Google's Gemini, OpenAI's GPT models, and other US systems dominated every major benchmark. American tech executives were confident, maybe even overconfident, but what they didn't realize was that a small team in Hangzhou, China, was about to prove them catastrophically wrong. DeepSeek wasn't your typical AI company. Founded in July 2023 by a former quantitative trader, it operated almost in stealth mode. While OpenAI was raising billions and making headlines, DeepSeek was quietly working on something that would fundamentally challenge every assumption about AI development. The company faced the same chip restrictions as every other Chinese AI firm. They couldn't access NVIDIA's most powerful processors. Instead, they were limited to the H800, a deliberately weakened version of the H100 designed specifically for the Chinese market to comply with US export controls. In the traditional Silicon Valley playbook, this should have been game over. Every expert knew that building competitive AI required massive computational resources. OpenAI had reportedly spent over $100 million training their latest models. Google was burning through billions in AI infrastructure. The assumption was simple: more computing power equals better AI. DeepSeek was about to shatter that assumption. On January 20th, 2025, DeepSeek quietly released their R1 model. On paper, it didn't look like much, just another AI model from a Chinese company that most people had never heard of. But when researchers started testing it, something extraordinary became apparent. This model, trained for under $6 million, was matching the performance of OpenAI's most advanced systems that had cost more than $100 million to develop. We're talking about a 95% cost reduction while achieving comparable results. How was this possible? DeepSeek had cracked the code on something called training efficiency. Instead of throwing more hardware at the problem, they had developed revolutionary techniques that could achieve the same results with dramatically less computational power. But here's where it gets really interesting, and why Silicon Valley executives started losing sleep. DeepSeek didn't just build a competitive model, they open-sourced it. They gave it away for free under an MIT license, making their breakthrough available to anyone in the world. Think about the strategic implications of that for a moment. While American companies were guarding their AI secrets and charging premium prices, China had just democratized access to state-of-the-art AI technology. The reaction was swift and brutal. On January 27th, just 1 week after DeepSeek's release, global tech markets went into freefall. NVIDIA, the crown jewel of AI infrastructure, lost $600 billion in market value in a single day. That's larger than the entire GDP of most countries. But the real story wasn't happening in the stock markets. It was happening in the boardrooms of America's biggest tech companies. At Google, CEO Sundar Pichai, who had previously dismissed Chinese AI capabilities, was forced to publicly acknowledge that DeepSeek had achieved something obviously important. At Microsoft, executives formed what they internally called a virtual war room on Teams to coordinate their response. Meta's Mark Zuckerberg suddenly announced plans to spend up to $65 billion on AI infrastructure in 2025, a massive increase from previous projections. These weren't just competitive moves. These were the actions of companies that had suddenly realized they might not have the unassailable lead they thought they had. But DeepSeek's breakthrough revealed something far more unsettling than just a single AI model. It exposed fundamental flaws in America's entire strategy for maintaining AI supremacy. The export controls that were supposed to cripple Chinese AI development had actually done the opposite. By forcing Chinese companies to innovate with constrained resources, the US had inadvertently accelerated their development of more efficient AI techniques. This is where the concept of neural warfare becomes relevant. We're not talking about science fiction here. We're talking about a very real form of strategic competition where the ability to process information, make decisions, and influence outcomes through AI gives nations unprecedented power. China's government had been preparing for this moment for years. Their new generation AI development plan from 2017 explicitly stated their goal of becoming the world's primary AI innovation center by 2030. They were thinking in decades while American companies were focused on quarterly earnings. The People's Liberation Army has been developing what they call intelligentized warfare, military doctrine that integrates AI across every domain of conflict. They're researching autonomous weapons systems, AI-enhanced cyber operations, and what they call cognitive warfare, using AI to influence how enemy nations think and make decisions. When you understand this broader context, DeepSeek's breakthrough takes on a different meaning. It wasn't just a technical achievement. It was a demonstration of strategic capability that had profound implications for national security. The American response was telling. Within weeks, the Trump administration was expanding export controls even further, adding new restrictions on Chinese AI companies. But many experts questioned whether this approach could work anymore. If Chinese companies could now achieve state-of-the-art results with less advanced hardware, what good were hardware restrictions? Some intelligence officials began describing this as a Sputnik moment for American AI, a wake-up call that the technological superiority the US had taken for granted was no longer guaranteed. Google accelerated development of their own efficiency-focused models. Microsoft began exploring partnerships that would help them compete with open-source alternatives. The entire Silicon Valley ecosystem was forced to confront an uncomfortable reality. The AI race was far from over, and they were no longer the only ones setting the pace. But perhaps most concerning for US officials was the broader pattern this represented. DeepSeek wasn't an isolated case. Chinese companies were also leading in AI patents, with over 6 times more generative AI patents than US companies. Chinese researchers were publishing AI research at rates that matched or exceeded American output. We're calm, witnessing what may be the most consequential technological competition in human history. This isn't just about building better chatbots or recommendation algorithms. AI technology is becoming foundational to everything from military systems to economic infrastructure to social control. The neural warfare isn't coming. It's already here. It's happening in research labs and boardrooms, in patent offices and open-source repositories, and the early evidence suggests that the outcome is far from predetermined. The question now isn't whether AI will reshape global power dynamics. It's who will be controlling that transformation. And after January 27, 2025, that question became a lot more complicated than anyone in Silicon Valley wanted to admit.